Hi, I'm Mary Sue Rominger. I am on the board of directors and a volunteer for the Bateman Horn Center. Welcome, and thank you so much for being here tonight. We will post a video of tonight's presentation on our YouTube channel in the next few days, and we do plan to do a Q&A at the end of the discussion. So those of you on Facebook Live, if you will submit your questions in the comments section, we will address them as we have time. Our speaker tonight is Peggy Allen. Peggy will start the presentation by giving a brief PowerPoint presentation, and then she'll moderate a panel of women with ME/CFS who will share their experiences with pregnancy and childbearing. Peggy is an assistant clinical professor with the University of Utah College of Nursing and a graduate of the Nurse Midwifery and Women's Health Nurse Practitioner Program. She's very knowledgeable about ME/CFS, as one of her daughters became suddenly ill with it in 2002 at the age of 12. Peggy's tremendous empathy for those affected with ME/CFS has inspired her to educate others about the realities of this illness. Her hope is to increase support, compassion, and access to quality health care for those with ME/CFS. Peggy also serves as a board of directors for the Bateman Horn Center. Please welcome Peggy Allen.
Thank you, Mary Sue, for that nice introduction. I'm very honored to be here with you tonight, and I want to extend a special thank you to the women who are here tonight to participate in our panel in a few minutes. Thank you to Jessica, Heather, and Marianne, and we look forward to hearing more from you in a little bit. As Mary Sue mentioned in my introduction, my professional background is as a nurse practitioner and certified nurse midwife, so I'm not an ME/CFS expert. The source of the information that I'll be highlighting for you tonight comes from a literature review and also correspondences that I had with ME/CFS experts Dr. Nancy Klimas and Lucinda Bateman back in 2007 and 2008 in preparation for an article that I wrote that was published in the Journal of Midwifery and Women's Health in 2008. Granted, 2008 was a long time ago, especially if we think in terms of evidence-based reviews. But the fact of the matter is that the state of our knowledge has really not changed much, in that there's a real scarcity of scientific inquiry into this topic. So really look forward to hearing the wisdom of experience from our panel of women as well. Let's go ahead and get started with an overview. The question of whether or not to bear children is a common concern of women with ME/CFS of childbearing age. Literature tells us this, and you'll hear some of that in the stories of the women who are joining us here tonight. And I would add the question of whether or not to limit family size is also an important one. You know, the decision of whether or not to have children can be a difficult one for anyone, but when you factor in illness with ME/CFS, it's all the more complicated. Wondering, will my illness with ME/CFS impact the health of my pregnancy and the health of my children? Will pregnancy and childbirth adversely affect my illness over the long term? Unfortunately, there's little scientific evidence to guide us, and our current recommendations that we have for women with ME/CFS are mostly based on the observations and opinions of ME/CFS experts, and that will likely remain the same until more interest is generated among women's health researchers and clinicians about reproductive issues in women with ME/CFS. The decision about whether or not to bear children is really a personal one, and ideally should be made thoughtfully with careful consideration about your life circumstances. What are your most important dreams and aspirations for your life, and perhaps your life as a couple, if you have a partner involved? What are the limits of illness ME/CFS may impose on you as an individual? And what are your resources for support or potential resources for support in coping with the challenges of parenting? You may decide that having a child is not the best decision for you, or you may decide to move forward with that, as did the women who are in our panel. And what struck me in conversations that I've had with these women is that decision is similar to others that are made about various aspects in life when learning to live with illness with ME/CFS. I included this slide to show you a timeline of the references that I've primarily used for the content of my overview. Starting in 2004 with an article that was published by Schachterle and Komaroff based on a study that they did to look at the reciprocal relationship of ME/CFS and pregnancy. And their study remains the most comprehensive study to date that we have that looks at this topic. The quote that I found published in the CFIDS Chronicle in 2005 and 2006 remains relevant today. And this was made, the statement was made by a physician and scientist who said, "We still have no definitive idea of the risks involved in pregnancy for women with chronic fatigue syndrome. The suggestion that it's okay to be pregnant is not yet substantiated by science." And I'll let you read the rest on your own. After my article in 2008, the CDC did come out with a publication that looked at reproductive issues or gynecologic histories of women with chronic fatigue syndrome, and they have planned follow-up studies, so stay tuned for more information. Let's take a look at the highlights of what research and expert opinion tells us, what we know or what we think we know about the experience of pregnancy and birth and postpartum in women with ME/CFS. First, pertaining to pregnancy, preliminary studies do suggest that there are fertility issues in women with ME/CFS, or that are more common in women with ME/CFS, particularly the conditions endometriosis and polycystic ovarian syndrome, or PCOS. Both can cause infertility, and both of them can be treated. The question of whether or not there's a higher rate of first trimester miscarriages remains unknown. This possibility was raised in the Schachterle and Komaroff study, and that the women they studied did have a higher rate of early pregnancy losses, but they were careful to point out that that finding could have been related to variables other than illness with ME/CFS. ME/CFS symptoms should either improve or remain unchanged for most women with ME/CFS, despite typically severe early pregnancy nausea and vomiting. And I will always remember something Nancy Klimas said, and that she had a patient once who felt so much better during pregnancy that she wished she could maintain a constant state of pregnancy. There's no increase in complications like preeclampsia, gestational diabetes, preterm labor, or low birth weight babies for women with ME/CFS, so that's good news. Taking a look at birth and postpartum, science has well documented the abnormal physiologic response to stress in individuals with ME/CFS and the poor tolerance to exercise. So from that, we can infer that the physiologic stress and pain of childbirth may trigger ME/CFS relapse and increase fatigability in women who have experienced birth with ME/CFS. But again, there's no scientific evidence that looks at that. There's no current evidence that ME/CFS can be passed to the fetus during pregnancy, and that's most pertinent for women who have a post-viral onset to illness, or that ME/CFS can be transmitted through mother's milk to a breastfed baby. That question has been raised in the literature, but it's not been studied, nor has it been studied whether or not illness with ME/CFS can affect a mother's milk supply, although that is something to think about. The most important consideration highlighted by ME/CFS experts, and the biggest issue to discuss with prospective parents, is the potential for an ME/CFS relapse postpartum. And this relapse typically occurs at 3 to 6 months postpartum and is oftentimes severe. We don't know exactly why that occurs, but we think it is probably related to a combination of factors like hormonal changes, changes in the immune system as the body adjusts to being not pregnant compared to being pregnant, related to changes in blood volume. Your body makes more blood to help support a pregnancy and then adjusts back to a non-pregnant blood volume after birth, as well as the obvious nocturnal sleep disruption. Being up at night with a baby is tiring to any new mother, and that can be especially challenging for a new mother with ME/CFS. Here are some things to consider for women in our audience who may be contemplating pregnancy or anticipating pregnancy at some point in their future. First, talk with your ME/CFS specialist and women's health care provider before you conceive, and be prepared for the possible need to discontinue ME/CFS medications. Medications that are used to control symptoms or manage symptoms with ME/CFS related to orthostatic intolerance, sleep disruption, mood, and pain may or may not be safely continued during pregnancy, and that decision ideally should be made on an individual, case-by-case basis with the usual considerations of risks and benefits. And you may be surprised that a number of medications can be safely continued during pregnancy. Also, choose an obstetric provider whose practices are a good match for your values and who is at least open to learning about ME/CFS. Don't be afraid to ask your obstetric provider, what would you consider your level of knowledge about my illness? Ask if they're willing to learn if they don't have prior experience or much knowledge about your illness. Having high quality, compassionate care helps anyone have a more positive, satisfying birth experience. And choosing a healthcare provider who's on the same page with you and going to be supportive is so very important. Adapt your lifestyle to conserve energy and pace yourself. I think that's true for most all aspects of learning to live with ME/CFS, true when planning a pregnancy. And that might include things like if you're employed outside the home, decreasing your work obligations, enlisting more support for home or other child care responsibilities from others. Consider a birth doula or postpartum doula. As some of you may know, a doula is a professionally trained birth companion who provides education, physical and emotional support, sometimes during pregnancy, definitely during labor and birth. And many also offer their services postpartum, kind of like a hired mother figure, to help provide education about newborn care, self-care for the new mother, even some light housekeeping, cooking, or errands. Most professional doula organizations do offer a sliding fee, and some hospitals, at least in our area, do have volunteer doula services. So if cost is a concern for you, you may want to check into those options. Consider prenatal yoga. We know that the relaxation and breathing techniques help with stress reduction, and we also think can help to moderate ME/CFS symptoms, can help with pregnancy discomforts, and definitely help with relaxation and pain reduction in labor. Something to keep in mind, especially with illness with ME/CFS, for women who can do yoga. Let's take a look at suggestions for coping with labor and childbirth for women with ME/CFS. Maintaining hydration is important for any woman during labor and birth to help support the normal process. All the more important for a woman with ME/CFS. ME/CFS experts do recommend what is called or termed vigorous IV hydration, and that's with the use of IV fluids like lactated ringers and normal saline to help maintain or expand blood volume. And we know that during times of stress, the autonomic nervous system becomes almost chaotic, pretty dysregulated. It doesn't work really well, and maintaining vascular volume can help moderate that abnormal physiologic response. Talk with your obstetric provider about the option of receiving physiologic stress doses of IV hydrocortisone, which is a steroid, in labor and repeated once again during the first 6 hours postpartum. And that's when your body's sort of really doing a lot of big hemodynamic adjustments to not being pregnant anymore. This recommendation is not based in science. There's no scientific evidence to support this is an effective intervention, but it makes good clinical sense per our ME/CFS experts. In that we know that the adrenal gland for individuals with ME/CFS can function well, but the signaling system that tells the adrenal gland to make hormones that help a body adapt and adjust positively to stress doesn't work real well. If your obstetric provider is not comfortable with this recommendation, I would provide this suggestion to you of seeking out a consultation with a maternal fetal medicine physician specialists. These are physicians who are considered kind of the Green Berets of obstetrics, and they're who we turn to for recommendations and plans of care for situations that come up in pregnancy for which there's not much or any evidence to guide us. And I think pregnancy with ME/CFS qualifies for that. Balance walking and frequent position changes in labor. This is a standard recommendation for women in labor to help make normal labor progress, to cope with pain and discomforts of labor. But in women with ME/CFS, we need to remember about fatigability and to balance that recommendation with rest. Resting on your left side is a very good position to help contractions remain more efficient in a resting position, and also to help maintain good blood flow through the placenta to the baby. Just a word of caution about hydrotherapy or getting in a shower or tub during labor and birth. Again, we don't have any studies that have looked at the effect that this has on women with ME/CFS, but we know, especially if it's an overheated tub or shower, causes vasodilation, which may cause increased fatigability and maybe the potential for more relapse in a woman with ME/CFS who also has a tendency toward orthostatic intolerance. Water birth has gained popularity and may be an option that you are wanting to consider, but a word of caution about that as well. Labor in and of itself is exhausting and physically very challenging, and being immersed in a tub of water, granted for most women, does help cope with the pain of labor. But remember that the challenges of labor can be very tiring for anybody, especially with ME/CFS. And any woman who is choosing or wanting a water birth to be eligible needs to be a woman who can get out of the tub quickly for safety if something was to come up with her, the maternal status or fetal status. So that's something to keep in mind and may not be a real wise option for women with ME/CFS. Consider an epidural anesthesia, especially for prolonged or more painful labor. And despite what you may still read in the lay literature, ME/CFS alone is not a good indication for a cesarean section. Granted, there's certainly a time and place for cesareans, but cesareans do carry the inherent risk of major abdominal surgery and a more painful, prolonged recovery. So an elective cesarean, I don't think is a good idea for women with ME/CFS, as well as other effects down the road on future pregnancies with a cesarean. Let's take a look at postpartum. Common sense, build a strong network of support, ideally during pregnancy, and especially during those first 3 to 6 months postpartum, whether that's through hired help, family members, partner, neighbors, your fellow church members. Very important in decreasing stress and helping to cope with the physical challenge of parenting a newborn. Consider a home health nurse visit during the early days at home to help evaluate and coordinate care for recovery. A lot of insurance companies do pay for this, and chronic illness with ME/CFS will possibly be something your insurance will allow. Pay attention to how nighttime sleep disruption is affecting you, whether you choose to breastfeed or formula feed your baby. There's no studies that look at whether women who breastfeed or formula feed have more or less problems postpartum. And everyone's an individual. You may find that you need to enlist the help and support of someone else in the house to take care of nighttime feedings. And it's good to just go with that and let go of any guilt that you may feel as a new mother. And that's all I have. Thank you for your attention, and I would like to invite up our wonderful panel of women as we move now to our discussion with them. So I'd like to start by having our panelists give a brief introduction about themselves. So we'll start with Mary Ann.
Okay, hi. I'm Mary Ann Heath. I'm 39. I got ME/CFS when I was 15. I started with mono. I'm married. I've been married for 19 years, and I have 4 children, ages 17, 12, 8, and 4. I did have one miscarriage after my second child was born. It was during the first trimester. And I'm home all the time. I rarely leave my house. I'm just dealing with ME/CFS, I think, like a lot of other patients.
My name's Heather Jackson. I'm just a few years behind, and I'm 37, and I've been sick for a really long time, a little bit over 24 years. I've had ME/CFS for almost as long as I can remember. I'm married. I've been married for 18 years, and I have 4 children as well. Mine are 15, 12, 8, and 2. I have 3 girls and a little boy. All of my births were C-section, except for my first one. That was a normal vaginal birth. And then I am also a stay-at-home mom, and sorry, I just had
That's great.
total.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, that's it. That's me.
My name is Jessica Turner, and I am 34 right now. I have 3 kids, and we've got an 8-year-old boy, a 6-year-old girl, and a 2-year-old girl, and they're all wonderful. My husband is amazing. I got sick with ME/CFS when I was 16, and so I have experienced the illness through kind of all these phases of life, through high school, college years, and on. And so we have the interesting perspective of we've built our life around the illness, whereas a lot of families are dealing with getting sick somewhere in the middle. And so I just wanted to kind of recognize that we all have different perspectives, and we're all dealing with this from different angles. But there's always something we can learn from each other. And was that it?
That's great.
Oh, and just that all 3 births were vaginal births, and I am currently, as far as I kind of consider myself a disabled stay-at-home mom, and I'm ill enough that I haven't been able to take care of any of the kids by myself for even a single day. And so we've had help from day one, and we've done everything from taking kids to people's private homes to be babysat, to someone staying in our home, to daycare. So we've kind of experienced a whole array of childcare help. And we can talk about that later, but wherever you want to go from there.
Oh, I remembered what I was going to say. So, and I did, I did have one miscarriage before my first daughter, and that was in the first trimester too. I miscarried twins.
Oh yeah, I've had 2 miscarriages. For whatever that.
For whatever that's worth.
Whatever that's worth.
Okay, thanks. What I should have mentioned before we started, I do have a list of questions that we'll be running through for our panel as kind of a frame of reference. And we hope that this will just kind of be a discussion of their wisdom and of their shared experiences. So next question for you all is, what influence, if any, did illness with ME/CFS have on your decision to become a parent? And if you'd like to share, what was your partner's, if you have a partner, opinion about this, and how did you resolve any differences? Looks like Mary Ann's ready to go first.
I'm ready. The microphone's right in front of me. Let's get this out. My husband and I chose to space our children. They are 4 years apart, and we decided that for me and for my health, that not having a little one at home, just one at a time would be enough for me. There are some advantages to that, but there's also some disadvantages. I've noticed that my little children usually don't have a sibling that they have to play with to keep them entertained. And so sometimes the spacing is a little bit difficult, but in other ways it's easier for us. I got married pretty young. I was 20, and we had our first child when I was 22. I feel I was quite young. And I'm grateful that I chose to do that and to space them as far apart as we wanted. We decided to have 4 children early on, and after our third, it was, questioning whether 4 was really the right number for us, and through some conversation, we decided that 4 would be what our family needed. What else did I miss in this question?
That's great.
There's a lot there. We'll let you continue.
Okay. So any CFS did not really play a part in my decision to have children, or my husband's. We both knew that we wanted children, and that was a goal that we had made from even before we met each other. We both wanted kids, and we just kind of knew that we would adjust to whatever CFS and brought with that. And that's what we did. So just like she did, we found that spacing our children was much better, especially for recovery time in between each one. It took a lot longer between each child to recover. So my kids I have 3 years between the first 2, 4 years between the second and third, and then 6 years between the third and fourth. And after each one, I swore I was never going to do it again. I was like, I wrote it in my journal, how horrible it was. I was like, I am never going to do that again. And then I would have another one because the kids are so wonderful and amazing, and they are totally worth it. And so my husband, the only real discussion that we had after we started having children and found how difficult it was afterwards, and recovery time, and each recovery time got longer. And I'm talking, and I don't want to frighten anyone, but for me, my recovery times were more in terms of years than they were in terms of weeks. Especially with the C-sections, I really didn't get back to my normal level until after the first one, about a year. After the second one, about 1.5 years. And my third C-section baby is 2 years old right now, and I'm just now starting to get back to my normal CFS level. So each one took just a little bit longer. And don't let that scare you if you want to have babies, because people with CFS, we are warriors. We can do it. We're totally capable of doing it, especially if you do what we've talked about before about having a good foundation around you before you get pregnant. If you have family members, friends, if you have joined support groups or have a church group or any type of group that you can be a part of that is willing to help you in any way. And I'm just talking about 1 or 2 people that you know that if you're having an exceptionally bad day that you can call and say, hey, I'm having a really bad day. Can you help me out a little bit today and take my kids, or come be with me today, or whatever that might be. So that was really mainly the things that me and my husband discussed as we got into the process of having kids, was making sure that I had the help that I would need and the people around me that I would need. Because my husband, he's a pilot right now, but he was in law enforcement before that. And we kind of joke, we say I'm a married single mom, because I'm alone for 50% of the time. I'm a single mom. Mm-hmm. So I really do rely on my neighborhood, my friends, my family. And if I'm having a bad day, I chalk it up to a bad day and I call for help. And people really are willing to help you. There's really no room for arrogance or pride, being prideful in this illness. You need to be humble. And if people are saying, hey, what can I do to help you? Give them something to do. They really do want something to do. And if you can say, hey, if you can be on my emergency list, and if I can call you and say, I am having a really rough day, can I call you in an emergency and just get some help today? And they'll be like, heck yeah, you can.
And the grandmas in the neighborhood
grandmas,
love to rock babies.
Yes, anybody.
You know, just throwing that in there.
So sorry, that was a long answer.
That's okay. Well, I think I'm similar to Heather and probably Marianne, just in the sense that that it wasn't really. I mean, I wanted to be a mom since I was little. It's just part of who I am and what I wanted to do in this life. And so if we kind of take you back in time a little bit to when I'm a newlywed. I got married pretty young too. I was 22, and I had Ben, our first, when I was 24. So we kind of had this 2 years of just agonizing over this decision. And I realized that it wasn't like we had to do it right then. Anyway, long story short, I was like, I had tried to go to school, and I just gradually cut back till I couldn't even maintain any, not even one class. And then I even tried to work a little part-time job when we were first married, and I became too sick for that. So we hit this, it was kind of a rock bottom point. And this is my story. So I'm, sharing it with you, but it came to this point where it was like, what am I doing with my life? And you kind of taken away the things that our society and we kind of give ourselves value with, right? How we participate in life. What are you get together with family and friends, what are the questions? Hey, what are you doing? You going to school? You working? What are you doing? And it was just a very difficult time because I had kind of all these things taken away, and I'm thinking, well, what about kids? What are we going to do? And between my husband and I, he had a great perspective, and I'd say, in tears, if I can't take care of myself, how can I take care of a baby? And what kind of mom am I going to be? I'm going to miss out on everything. And he, with all the love in his heart, he just said, you're going to be a great mom, and the kids are going to be okay, even if they have to go to daycare, even if somebody else does these things. He kind of had that perspective, and I had to work through the kind of anger and the grief that I was going to miss out on these things, and that I wanted to be the one taking care of them. So that was a real thing. That working through that was a really big deal. And the turning point came when we were consulting with my doctor, Lucinda Bateman, who is an ME specialist here in Utah. And she looked us straight in the eye. We kind of shared all of these concerns with her, and she looked us straight in the eye and she said, look, Jessica, you cannot put your life on hold for this illness. You might get better, you might not. The thing to do is to figure out what you want most, what really matters most, and find a way to make it happen. Even, here's the big capital even, if it means making major accommodations and concessions about it. And so once I kind of came to peace with that, and we had an amazing support network of family and friends, that was like when we decided to jump in. And it was the scariest thing I've ever done, I have to admit. When we found out we were pregnant, it was exciting but absolutely terrifying, because we didn't know what was going to happen to me. What are we going to do? And I don't want to discount that also personal faith was a very big part of that as well. And I know it is for a lot of women too, is your core, it's that connection. And so MECFS had a huge part of the decision. It was almost like we decided we're going to do this in spite of CFS. And we're so glad we did, because our kids are the best thing, the hardest thing, but the best thing that's ever happened to us.
Thank you. This question is for any one of you who may want to answer, and anyone else who may want to add. Did you inform your obstetric provider that you have MECFS? And do you think this provider's attitude regarding MECFS or level of knowledge about MECFS impacted your experience of pregnancy in any way? And if so, how? Anybody?
The microphone's here again,
Yeah,
right? My first doctor kind of ignored the fact that I was ill. I explained it to him, and he just said to me, that's not my specialty. I take care of mothers who are having babies, and there was not a lot of help. I had my first 2 children with that doctor. I moved on to a different doctor, and was happy to find that this doctor paid attention to me. He would ask me things of, okay, I'm not as familiar, what do you know? Can you help me? I was even more impressed when he gave me a recommendation at one time and said, because of your illness, we're gonna do it this way instead of the way that I do it with every other patient, because you're a little bit different, and that's okay. I just appreciated that he gave me the time, that he looked at, just enough to know that having ME/CFS didn't make me just like everybody else. Even though I desired to have a pregnancy just like everybody else, he just made it that I was comfortable, and I really appreciated the time that he spent with me.
So I had 3 different doctors. My first one, it was like I said I had CFS, and that was pretty much like saying I had a hangnail. That was pretty much all of the attention I got when I said I had CFS. And he was a very kind doctor. He was a very gentle person. He was, I really liked him, but I was more treated just like any other patient, which for me at the time was totally fine, because I kind of liked it. I kind of liked having the fact that that was a normal thing about my life. I was not Heather with CFS. I was Heather pregnant, and that was awesome. And but it did mean that, when things popped up with CFS, I was not open to sharing it with him. But my pregnancy went fine, my delivery went fine, everything was fine. My second doctor was much more open. He was younger, and I think that played a factor. I think a lot of some of the younger doctors are a little bit more informed lately. At least that's been my experience. And he was great. He would talk. It wasn't his specialty, but he was willing to learn and willing to talk. My third doctor that delivered my last little baby, she was amazing. It was not her specialty either, but she took a lot of time. She researched, she would listen to me, and even if she didn't have all the answers, she was willing to work with me and, talk with other doctors, or at least listen to me and make me feel like I was loved and I was being taken care of. And I think that that's mainly what we want for our doctors. And so my suggestion to you would be, looking back, is to go find another doctor if you're not happy with the one you're with. If you get on with a doctor that CFS is a hangnail, you need a new doctor. If you get on with a doctor that says, that's like a psychological disorder, you need a new doctor. If you get on with a doctor that says, well, that's not my specialty, what else is going on with you? New doctor. You don't have to stay with a doctor just because you have come to this doctor and you've gone through all of your past history and you are seeing this doctor. You don't have to stick with this doctor. Go and find a new doctor. Probably since the time that I have gotten sick until now, I was trying to add it up last night so I could give you an exact number, but it is somewhere between 22 and 26 doctors that I have seen over my lifespan, trying to find a doctor that understood what CFS and ME is. And granted, I have been sick for a long time. I have been sick since before my adolescence, and so that's a lot of years. That's 26 years of trying to find a new doctor. And now I've got Dr. Lucinda Bateman here in Salt Lake City, who is amazing, one of the best in her field, and she's fantastic. And that we don't all have access to that. But before I got her, I did find other doctors that were kind, that were willing to listen and willing to learn. And if you can find a doctor that's willing to listen and willing to learn if they don't understand, and that is a good doctor. And that is one you can stick with. You can research on your own and go talk to that doctor about the research that you found. And if he's willing to learn, that's a good doctor, in my opinion.
Cool. Ditto that. That was perfect. I also went through that, and I do this every time I'm approaching a new healthcare provider, whether it's going to see a physical therapist or whatever, you go through this debate. You're like, okay, how much information is enough but not too much? And, you know, there's always like this big sigh I give. It's like, all right, how much do you want to know? And for my first pregnancy, I saw an OB, and she was female, and she was really great. She was amazing. With my second pregnancy, I actually decided to pursue the nurse midwives, and I met Peggy around that time, which was really great. And we kind of finagled things, so I was able to consult with Peggy throughout part of that pregnancy, and also the new midwife. And I just felt like the midwives weren't as rushed as the OBs. They kind of took a little more time with me. They listened, and I just found one that I clicked with. And I think, like Heather was saying, that's the key thing to just feeling like you're taken care of during pregnancy, because you feel vulnerable even more than, there's so many unknowns. We're not used to being able to count on our body. We don't know how it's going to react. This is new territory, and it was really scary, and it just means a lot to be able to have a provider that is kind, compassionate, and open-minded. Honest, besides Peggy, none of them really knew anything about ME/CFS, and that was okay. And I kind of educated them in tidbits along the way. I didn't have to dump it all out on them in the first visit. Mm-hmm. But and a lot of it comes with trial and error and learning yourself, because you learn, like, okay, what's going to be relevant about my condition to this doctor? And it's trial and error. You know, we're all learning, and a lot of it was learning about myself, learning what my limitations are. And by the second and third pregnancy, we could say, okay, this is what went well last time. This is what went badly. And that's why we're glad to be here to kind of share a little bit of that learning curve with you.
Yeah, so a strong message that I hear from all of you is how important it is to be validated by your healthcare provider. So, all right, out of interest in time, let's kind of move through the next set of questions a little more quickly. Thank you for all the wonderful things you've shared. If you can generalize, would you say your ME/CFS symptoms remain unchanged, improved, or worsened during your pregnancies? And was it similar or different comparing your pregnancies, since you've all had more than one?
All right, my 4 pregnancies. My first pregnancy, I was quite a bit younger, and I felt better. So I was hopeful for my next pregnancy, and we lost that one. And the following pregnancy, I didn't see much change. The next pregnancy, I was worse, and my last pregnancy was really, really rough. I slept about 20 hours a day through my first trimester. And so my husband would bring food in for me to eat. I'd be awake, and I'd go back to sleep. My older children missed me during that first trimester. Thankfully, we hit the second trimester, and I was doing a little bit better. But to compare 4 different pregnancies, the labor was extremely different. The first labor was long and difficult. The last labor was really simple, really easy. Baby came quickly. So I think that each pregnancy is going to be different, and age definitely plays a factor in some of those things.
I would totally agree that age plays a factor. They each got a little bit harder. I think I said that before. My deliveries were each different in their own way, and each one got, my second one was very, very difficult. My third one was difficult, but not as bad as the second one. And the fourth one, by then I had C-sections down. I knew what to expect and what was going into it. With a C-section, you do go through labor. It's just after you have the baby. It is very painful. It's hard to get up and down. It's hard to go to the restroom. It's hard, and it's painful longer. Like when you have a vaginal birth, you're only in pain for the duration of the labor, and then once the baby's out, you have a little tiny bit time of healing, and then you're okay with the cesarean. it's a much more painful, longer recovery. So if you can do the vaginal birth, I would highly recommend a vaginal birth over a cesarean. Mine was an emergency cesarean with my second one. And then I just had to continue with those. In the area I was living in, I couldn't do a VBAC. So I couldn't have a vaginal birth after cesarean. I had to continue with cesarean sections. But it is doable. Like, I would say, I guess I should give you my level. I would say that I am a moderate person with ME/CFS. So if, like, one of the questions Dr. Bateman poses to us when we come in for our visits is, how many hours do you spend with your feet on the ground? I would say in a given day, 4 to 8 hours, maybe, you know, that's 4 would be a bad day, 8 hours would be a good day. That's how many hours I'm active during the day. So, and I would kind of rate myself as a moderate. A moderate CFS person, okay? So I am not as severe as some people that you've seen, like if you've seen the documentary Unrest, I'd recommend you watch it if you haven't. I'm not as severe as Jennifer Brea was. I was when I was younger. When I was in high school, I was bedridden. But so now I'm more of a moderate. So when I give my examples of what's happened, I'm more of a moderate person. Someone that's more severe would have more severe reactions. But I was talking with Jess, and we were kind of talking about if you kind of plan on your pregnancy that you're going to be kind of moderately on bed rest for the duration of the pregnancy, it's kind of a realistic expectation, right? Yeah, that you're kind of a moderate bed rest, that would be a good expectation to have, and then anything you get on top of that is a bonus. And so if you can prepare your family and your husband or your partner for that expectation, then if you get something better, then that's great. Happy day. And if you actually get bed rest, my second one I was on bed rest for 4 months, then you know you were kind of planning on that anyway. So
thank you. Jessica, let's go ahead and move on to another consideration.
Sure, Peggy.
Was illness with ME/CFS addressed in your plans for birth?
Yes, it was. It was Dr. Bateman, actually, you in your presentation, you mentioned the stress doses of hydrocortisone, and she suggested that to me, and we did it for the last 2, and I think it helped. I think it was a really good thing, and my OB and the midwife, they were open to that. They said, sure, we can go ahead and give that a try, and it was written up in my birth plan. So I didn't have to sit and explain it to the delivery nurses and so forth. That was a good thing. The other thing I wanted to mention, that I was actually able to consult with the maternal fetal medicine doctors for the last 2 pregnancies, and they were fantastic. And I would recommend, if that's feasible, especially maybe for a first-time mom, and they're fantastic at helping you weigh the drug benefits and risks, and just kind of helping put into perspective what you need to, because in a lot of ways I felt like a normal patient. I felt like, but I'd say the IV fluid, and also just little things like asking them to leave the IV line in longer for, like you said, like 6 hours after or something, because usually as soon as you're done, they rip that IV line out, and you're like, no, leave that in. Please, I need more IV fluids, and things like that, where you learn, like, you can speak up and say, no, leave that IV line in, and that sort of thing. So
great.
So it did. There are little things.
Yeah, thank you. Let's take a look at postpartum. Having a new baby presents joys and challenges to any family. In what ways did you prepare for the early weeks postpartum at home? And out of interest and time, along with that, I'd like you to provide any tips you may have for our viewers about particular apparatuses or newborn equipment or supplies that you use that help make things be easier during that postpartum period.
Make sure you have a boppy.
Well, hold on. Boppies aren't the best.
Oh, what's the best?
That's
Just something.
So for example, right? Because pain is a big issue, and headaches are my big thing. And so to be nursing and like have your head down and like the weight of the baby,
It's the worst.
I found this cool thing, and maybe if I can go home and look up what it's called, I'll post it on the comment section, right? But it's like this one that straps around you, and it has a little clip, and it holds, it's like a platform thing, and so the baby lays on that, and you can really let that hold the weight of the baby. Boppies are good, but it's called My Breast Friend. Yeah, that's what it's called. I bought it at Babies R Us, which is now out of business, so I don't know where you're gonna find it. But
Google it.
Google it. My
I
Best
find
Breast
that
Friend.
Come baby number 4, I was still finding things to make it easier. Just as easy as having a changing table in a location that was more convenient for me. I found that having that out in the main area, maybe not be where most people would put a changing table, but it was less up and down for me. That became a good help.
I want to throw in there, well, before we run out of time, but a big thing is breastfeeding. And we chose, a lot of the nurses and so forth, they make you think it's all or nothing. Are you going to breastfeed or are you not? And we learned that it's perfectly acceptable to do both, or none, or all of the above. I know.
Do what you need to do.
And we did both, and it was fantastic. I didn't produce a lot of milk because I wasn't nursing consistently, but I felt like my kids got a little bit of that immune support and benefit of breast milk.
And I think even just let you decide. Don't have, you're gonna have advice from everybody, but it comes down to what's going to work for you. I did choose to breastfeed, and we found out early on that with POTS, in the middle of the night, I can't get up to go get a crying baby. I tried one night and I was on the ground so quickly. So every time the baby would cry in the middle of the night, it was my husband's responsibility to go grab the baby and bring the baby to me.
Me too.
That's how we
That's how we
managed
did
it. But bottle feeding is great. Popping or formula feeding is fabulous. So do what works best for you.
It's a lot of trial and error.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And don't feel guilty.
Yeah, that's the biggest thing.
Yes.
And you got to kind of think outside the box a little bit.
I want to just add to a suggestion from one of our panelists when we last addressed this topic several years ago, was to get lightweight equipment, like a lightweight stroller, the umbrella stroller. And I thought that was-
Everything lightweight.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I went for like the cutest stuff with the first baby, and it was all so heavy, and
Oh
you're
my
like,
gosh.
oh, that was
Carrying the car
Go
seat
for the lightweight for
will
sure.
kill your neck and shoulders. It'll make your nerves on fire. Same with if you're nursing and you don't have something to support you, it will kill your shoulders and your neck and your back.
And I had chunky babies, so
Yeah.
man, they're heavy.
Her babies are awesome.
Last question before we conclude tonight. I'd like to hear from you all. Do you think MECFS has affected your relationship with your children? And what do you think your child would say or has said about your illness with MECFS?
So we were going over these questions last night, and my daughter was in the room. So I asked her that question. She's 12, and she goes, "What's CFS?" That's how much it's affected her. But then she thought about it, and then she remembered. But she said, it just means that you're in bed a lot. And I do a lot of momming from bed, and that's okay. We do homework in bed. We snuggle in bed. We watch movies in bed.
Card games. We did
Card games.
Card
Video
games in bed.
Yep.
But my kids have not wanted for love or affection or quality time with their mom or laughter or joy or snuggles
Yeah.
or I'm just as involved in my kids' lives as any other mom. I'm just not in the PTA. So
Yep.
chalk that up to the winning side.
I find that my children are more compassionate.
Yeah,
My oldest
absolutely.
child is
Absolutely.
taking a CNA class. She started just this week. And I laugh because I suggested that to her years ago, but the compassion I see in her, I know is something that she's learned from watching how other people have to take care of me. And so, yeah, there are some things as a parent that I feel like I miss out on, but sometimes on the other end, my children see a lot more. They're very patient with people. They're very
Yeah.
kind with differences, and it's a
Definitely.
good thing. There was one thing that I wanted to mention before we close this. I have a friend that has a different autoimmune disorder, and she chose to have her last child through surrogacy. That is something
Wow.
that I never had even thought of. I know it's really expensive to do, and so that limits a lot of people. But if I could have done it over, surrogacy would have been an option that I think I would have really enjoyed,
Considered.
because I still get my child, and it would be very helpful. Talking with my husband, it's very, very expensive. So it is something that you would have to agree on, but that's something that we hadn't ever touched before in these discussions.
Yeah.
And we're all going to have crashes anyway. I'd much rather have a crash because I did something serving my kids than for any other reason on the planet.
And I feel like, oh dang it, I just blanked out. Well, let me tell you one thing. My 6-year-old, I asked her about how she feels about mommy having CFS, and she goes, "It makes me feel sad you have it." And I appreciated her honesty. And then we talked about all the kind of hidden perks that are involved, like you get a ride on mommy's lap when I use the Jazzy at the grocery store, and you let mommy use the wheelchair at Disneyland. I mean, there's perks. There's hidden perks. But yeah.
Thank you all so very much. We're getting the signal that it's time to conclude. So I thank you all for your generosity and openness in sharing your experiences and wisdom, and I trust that that's all been very valuable to
I wish we had
our
more time.
viewers. Yeah. Thank you all. And do we have time for questions?
We answered 2 last off.
Oh.
What about there was a question, and I don't know if I'm Mike, so if you'll repeat the question. There was a question about, are any of your children showing signs of MCFS?
Oh, I got this one.
Should we repeat the question? So they
Yeah, so the question was, are any of our children showing signs of ME/CFS? We had the scare of our life. Our daughter got mono last month. It was very scary. I called in our doctor's office, and the best information we could get so far was just let her rest. Don't let her do a single thing. So that's what we did. She's recovered from mono very quickly, and so we're very hopeful that everything is fine. We do worry. My husband's mother also has ME/CFS, and so it comes from both lines. As far as we can tell right now, she's just fine, but that scare is there. It's very real.
It's always a question.
And
in the back
yes,
of your
it
mind.
is there. So hopefully, we can do the best we can with our kids, and it's possible.
Can I say something though? With that said, really fast though, I think we've also learned that should that horrible thing happen, it's okay, because it's we've learned that you can still have a life. You can still have joy. You can still pursue things.
You can't control.
You can't control it. Yeah.
You can't control if it's here, if they're going to get it or not. But at the same time, with the experience you have with living with this,
Yeah.
you can help guide them through. There's
Yeah.
all the fun little things that we've learned to do along the way. Pick up your order your groceries, or having a vacuum robot has saved me. It's all of these little steps that are things that you can teach your kids if they do end up getting sick.
And you can still have a family, you can still have a spouse, you can still have a life that is full of everything that you ever thought you could have that was important, you can still have.
Because it would be devastating. It would be horrible, but it would be okay. I think.
And none of my kids have shown signs of anything.
Same here. My kids are all healthy, but they're still very young.
Yeah.
Have we addressed the questions? I've been
Were there
given,
any
we've
other
got 2
questions?
minutes left.
2 minutes.
So,
We're running low on time.
Okay.
There was one question, a little bit about the postpartum doula. So,
Oh,
what did they do?
that was news to me. I'd never heard of the doula. Postpartum doula.
yeah, definitely. Many who function as labor companions also provide service as a postpartum doula. There are some who function as a postpartum doula. And I really see them as kind of a mother figure, things that you would hope, most of us would hope our mother would provide when we have our own children. They do provide education about newborn care and support, which is really important, especially for first-time mothers, and actual hands-on assistance with that when that's needed. They provide instructions to new mothers about self-care. They provide assistance with light housekeeping, with meal preparation, errands, the kinds of things that you might ask your own experienced mother for support and help with after having a baby. And these are just individuals who are trained professionally and are a good source of information about newborn care and self-care for a postpartum mother.
Oh, can I throw one more thing out there? My husband, and it depends on, your partner's employment stuff, but his company offered, was it the FMLA? It's kind of the short-term disability, and so I would say look into it, because I didn't think that we would count as that, but I counted as a family member needing long-term or short-term care. Okay, I'm getting the X.
I know that
the X.
I'll hear if anybody has other questions at another
Yeah.
time. We're all reachable. We'd all
Yeah.
like to talk with other people about this.
Yeah.
There's a lot more that we have to talk about.
Yeah, I think all three of us would be happy to talk to anyone through email or whatever.
Anytime.
As would I, and we wish you all out there the very best. Thank you.
Thank you.